Welcome everybody to Coffee and Insights. Just waiting for everyone to join. Lots of people coming on, so thank you so much. Welcome to those of you who are joining Coffee and Insights for the first time, and welcome back to those that are have joined us before, and this is our second Coffee and Insights. So this is an opportunity for me to chat to you, to have a coffee with you, and to really hopefully inspire you with some really interesting people and topics that I have come across in the last few months and want to share with you. A real opportunity for us all to chat in the chat box as well. So if you've got any questions, anything that you'd like to mention, say hi to everybody, tell us where you're from. Just a very relaxed half an hour that I hope you're all going to enjoy. So grab your coffee or your tea. And let's get started. So welcome to you all. Just a reminder, in case some of you don't know, I am Zoe Sinclair. I'm the co-founder of This Can Happen, and I'm super delighted to be running this Coffee and Insights session today. We are back from Singapore. Many of you will know that. We've had our first in-person event in Singapore, and I was delighted to be there. We hosted a really great event thanks to A&O Sherman, and we had 50 to 60 HR professionals from the region, from Singapore, come together to have a really great networking session, and we had lots of high-level discussions on mental well-being. And continuing from the Coffee and Insights that we had at the beginning of the year, I also wanted to carry on the conversation that we were having in Singapore about neurodiversity. So without further ado, I'm going to hopefully, if technology works, I am going to bring in Bex O'Malley to my little studio here. And hopefully we're going to be able to speak to her. So on this subject of neurodiversity. So, Bex, are you coming in? Let's see, is this working? Oh, it seems to be working. Bex, yay, you're with me. That's fantastic. That's really good. Oh, and you've got a This Can Happen logo next.
I just saw that. My beautiful print that's usually behind me is disappeared.
I'm sorry. Full visibility for everybody. You know, Bex isn't from This Can Happen. She works in the aviation industry in New Zealand, and she is soon to be a certified ADHD informed coach. Correct?
Yes, you're right. Yeah, thank you. So I've got that fun task at the moment where I've submitted my assessment. But as an ADHDer, I now have to try and be patient for the next month while I wait for my results. So
Right.
wish me
Well,
luck.
congratulations to you for even getting
Thank
to this
you.
point. So we're really, really grateful for you to be joining us today, especially as I know it's late for you, but want to dive in for a little quick, discussion with you, just to, I suppose, give us context, first of all, to talk to us about your experience of neurodiversity and mental health. We would love to hear.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Zoe. So I guess for myself, I was actually diagnosed with ADHD later in life. That diagnosis has really helped me to make sense of so many of my, say, past experiences, both challenges and strengths. For years, I guess I unknowingly was kind of like pushing myself through, say, environments that weren't designed for my brain, which more often led to burnout, severe bouts of, like anxiety, a lot of self-doubt. And I guess since my diagnosis, I've been able to actually start to understand who I actually am, how I guess I've, there's this term mask that gets thrown around quite a bit. And so I feel like quite a lot of us that are diagnosed later in life could have or possibly are amazing actors, if you like, because actually, there's been a lot of unpacking and realizing that, oh, actually, no wonder I feel like conflicted with a lot of stuff, because stuff isn't aligning with me, because it's not actually me being my true self. It's who I think I need to be, or who I'm scared I am, that's being portrayed. My diagnosis, I guess, has helped me to develop a self-awareness, set boundaries. I didn't even know what they meant until it, so my diagnosis, I should add, was, just over 5 years ago now, so 5.5 years ago. I'm soon to be 41, so it's about 35. And like a lot of women diagnosed late in life, it's that real common time where, the hormonal imbalance is all kicking in again. And so, early stages of perimenopause and things can be a really common time. But yeah, so I guess for myself, kind of going back to, like understanding what boundaries are, and then looking to actually set boundaries in place and starting to advocate for what I actually say need to work at my best, or even just be my best, has been, quite interesting. Mental health and neurodiversity are quite closely linked, and the reality is, again, I've shared, the fact that I was diagnosed later in life, and a lot of neurodivergent individuals experience a lot of higher rates of anxiety, depression, and burnout, often because of trying to fit in to the term neurotypical. So that's the brain wiring that kind of fits more to the norm versus diverges from the norm. And as we know, with a lot of different things globally, is there's kind of a standard and a medical model. Everything globally that's been, sort of based on, male experience and all the rest of it. There, I said it. I think it's International Women's Day, so hopefully I'm forgiven for that.
Yeah. And actually, Bex, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I think one of the things that I really want to pull out from what you've mentioned is the word ADHD burnout. That is something that I just feel potentially we don't know enough about, that is really relevant for employers, colleagues to understand about. So can you just tell me a little bit more about that? Because I think that's super interesting.
Yeah, no, it is. I'm glad you pulled me back on that, and that's a prime example of an ADHD just being pleasantly interrupted, because I'll just yak on. So look, ADHD burnout is different from typical burnout, and the reality is that many of you possibly even haven't even heard of this thing, ADHD burnout. It's different because it's not just about overwork. So a lot of time you hear people talk about, oh yeah, I'm overworked or I'm burnt out, and sadly it become a bit of a trend. But ADHD burnout is not just about overwork. It comes from the constant effort of navigating a world that doesn't always accommodate neurodivergent needs. So this includes like your executive function, as say for myself as an ADHD, or I know that the AFEMA action, focus, effort, emotion. Gosh, look at my working memory working really well right now.
Please don't worry. Please don't worry.
Yeah, they literally lead to struggling to manage workloads, deadlines, energy levels, emotional exhaustion, suppressing, say, different traits to fit into, just to fit in is all very exhausting. And so, as you can imagine, it takes a toll. Dopamine depletion. So ADHD brains thrive on interest, novelty. So interest and novelty driven tasks, and prolonged, engagement in tasks that don't provide stimulation can lead to mental fatigue. And it feels literally like hitting a wall. My most recent bout was around August last year, and I literally had to take a full 2 weeks off work to actually recover and be able to even consider going to work, let alone getting through a day of work. So yeah, beautiful, supportive workplace and managers and everything like that. That there was no questions asked until I was ready to engage and start to partner with them and figure out actually what was going wrong or not going right, etc. So yeah, the tricky part in this is that by the time I realise I'm burnt out, I'm already in it.
And I think you know what, Bex, I really appreciate you talking about this, and you might not be able to see, but a fellow attendee, Wendy Bowie, she has written something in the chat box about this and the sensory overload, the social exhaustion. And I think again, it's just one of these things that we want to be out there, that we want people to understand. And I know this is a very quick moving coffee and insight, but I really want to thank you for just highlighting this to us and making us as managers, as leaders, aware. So I'm really grateful for you joining, Bex, and I hope you might be able to stay up for 20 minutes longer to enjoy the rest of the conversation. But I
have got a cup of tea to finish.
Excellent. So again, Bex, thank you very much. I'm hoping if technology works, I'll be able to put you back. But thank you very much for highlighting this very important issue.
My pleasure. Go well, everybody.
Thank you. Right, here we go. Okay, so Bex, again, really thank you so much indeed. And the thing about Coffee and Insights is that we very quickly move from one thing to another. And what I want to do now is turn to something around grief. And the reason I bring this up is, as many of you know, we've done a really interesting piece of grief research last year. And companies and individuals continue to ask us, how can we make this a topic in our organization? How can we create an environment where we can speak about grief, or we can set up a grief network, perhaps? So I've got Asad Iqbal here. Asad, are you there? You are. Asad, hi.
Hey Zoe, how are you doing?
Hi, it's so lovely for you to be with us. Thank you very much indeed. I do apologise that the This Can Happen logo is up on your screen. That's not intentional. You are from EY, everyone, and I'm really grateful for you coming on to have a quick chat with me. As I said, lots of people asking us all the time, and EY is doing some really interesting stuff in this space. And I suppose I just introduce yourself and your where you're coming from and your experience in this grief space.
Yeah, sure. First of all, thank you for having me as well. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. So hello everyone. My name's Asad Iqbal. I'm a senior manager at EY. I'm part of the forensics practice, so I am an accountant, but one of the fun ones, I like to say, because I specialize in forensics. But alongside my kind of client-facing role, I also lead on DE&I and wellbeing for the UK forensics practice. And I set up and co-lead the firm-wide grief and loss affinity group, which I'll talk a bit more about in a second. I'm also currently doing some work with the EY Foundation, who are our corporate charity focused on social mobility, particularly working with young people and helping them navigate the employment landscape, which is a subject close to my heart. So in terms of grief and loss, it's been a bit of a strange one in terms of it feels like it's kind of crept up on me a bit in terms of my kind of role and my involvement. I mean, over the years, I've had my own experience of grief in terms of losing various family members. I lost a couple of cousins, years ago when they were quite young. I lost my grandparents a few years ago. But when I started my career, and this makes me feel very old, but 10 years ago, and I always say EY was my first big boy job because I started as a graduate. I very much had a quite outdated, I would say, like 1980s perception of what it's like to work in a big corporate in terms of work is very much work. You don't really talk about anything outside of that. Nothing personal should be brought into the workplace. And my first few experiences of trying to navigate grief aligned with that a bit, because the response I got from some people around me was a bit like, well, sure, someone's died, but kind of that's it. Particularly when it came to thinking about, the logistics around, okay, you have to take a day off to go to a funeral. Who was it that died? What does that mean in terms of where you can basically charge your time? But then, I've also had an experience at the other end of the spectrum where the people around me couldn't do enough for me in terms of making sure I felt supported and had the time I needed to process what was going on. For me, it was really a conversation I had about a year and a half ago with my co-lead for the Grief and Loss Affinity group now, Carway, who's absolutely fantastic. And we're friends. She had a experience of quite a big bereavement around that time, and we were just kind of catching up to see how she was doing. And the way my brain works is, well, I wonder, there must be someone in the firm who's thinking about this, because we have so many great networks and communities. It felt like there should be something focused on this, and it turned out there wasn't. But there was very much an ask from the firm. Well, if you're keen, go ahead and build it. So that's how we got up and running.
Great. Now, for you, as part of your network, do you define what grief is? What is there pillars that your grief network stand on? How did you go about building it?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, one thing we were really wary of when we first started this was that we didn't want it to be just me and Carway coming up with what we think there should be and just going away and delivering it. We wanted to try and make sure we were quite consultative. So we held some listening sessions to begin with, which were very much an open invitation for anyone in the firm who wanted to join, just to understand what would they want in this space if we were going to try and build something. And a few of the things that emerged for us were around when you hear the word grief in particular and loss, you mind quite naturally will go to bereavement. However, there are other types of loss as well that we wanted to make sure weren't being excluded. So whether it's the end of a long-term relationship, maybe it's estrangement from family, we wanted to make sure there was enough space being held for all of these things. Another thing that really came out for us was as well around, again, going back to the more the logistical side around how do you define your relationship with a person who perhaps has passed away. And it's so much broader now, especially in the world we live in terms of it's not just direct blood relations always. It could be that you've built your own family around you for various reasons. So making sure that there is also space for that to be recognised and celebrated in a way as well.
Excellent. And the cultural piece, because obviously that also is a very big part of the grief. Yeah,
one thing I always really encourage people to do, if you're thinking about trying to do something in the grief space in your workplace, and I think this applies whether it's you've already got an established policy or group around this, or whether you're just starting out. This is a really tricky topic to get people to talk about in one sense. Some people are looking for a place to talk about it, whereas for others, I think they want to participate, but it's just difficult by its nature to really get into it. There's so much value in looking at what you're doing across the board, and if you get the tonal environment right in terms of just that sense of belonging for everyone, there's roots into it. So an example I would use is I recently sat down with some of my friends from the South Asian community that we have at EY. And it was for a podcast we were recording around this topic of culturally, how do we deal with grief? So as a member of the South Asian community as well, kind of us almost comparing notes, because we're all South Asian, but from slightly different parts of South Asia. So, when someone does die, what does that mean for you? And it was really interesting, like the nuances that cropped up in terms of things that are different, but also the thing that really came out was this shared sense of community and how, whether it's a wedding, whether it's a funeral, people are going to show up for you. So having those conversations in these different spaces, no matter what the community or network is, I think can be really helpful to have a slightly more indirect route to talking about grief and loss.
And as Bex has written in the chat box, grief isn't always about losing a person. You can be grieving from so many different things.
Sure.
As Bex said, because of her, she was going through amount of grief for her late in life diagnosis. Grief can mean so many things. Just very final quick questions. A lot of workplaces sort of ask us about grief network versus policies. And what policy should be in place, but do managers actually take things on a one-to-one basis? So is there a need for a policy? And I just wondered whether you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think, and I think this is true no matter kind of what the size of your organization is. I think it's important to have some kind of policy in place so people have an idea of what to do when you have to deal with this kind of situation. Because, if you're a line manager of someone, it might be the first time you have to do this. But my encouragement would be to avoid over-policising. I was at another event recently where I was talking to some people who had just started a company and they said, well, we haven't had to deal with this yet because no one has had a bereavement. So what do we do kind of thing? And I was saying, like, as much as it could be tempting to try and cater for all possible situations, you're never going to be able to, because there's so many different things at play. I think having enough of a framework that then people can implement it in a way that really speaks to the spirit of what you're trying to do, which should be to support your employees, is crucial. And again, if you get the kind of environment right, and I always say it's really difficult to train people to have emotional intelligence, but if people do have emotional intelligence, they will try and do the right thing. So even if a piece of paper is telling you, this is what's what in terms of the policy, they'll implement it in the right way as well to make sure that person is being supported in the way they need to be.
Really, really helpful, Asad. Thank you so much. Quite a few comments coming in also. So thank you very much for just, starting this conversation. And I think my final point is, yes, you're from EY, a huge multinational organization, but this doesn't just apply to huge organizations. Grief in all its forms can affect anyone at any time. As many of you might have heard before, our grief research even came out of from our very small team, how many of us in our very small team were experiencing loss or grief at a certain point in time. Yeah. So I think that's just an important note to make. Asad, as always, thank you very, very much indeed for your time. Really appreciate you being with us, and have a good rest of your day. I hope you'll stay for the final interview that I'm about to do. Thank you, Asad.
Thank you so much.
So again, now going from one topic to another, but really, really interesting. I've been having quite a lot of conversations about from awareness to action in the mental well-being space. And a lot of companies say to me, or not companies, individuals will say to me, there's some habits that I've really got to change. And there are two that come to the top. One is I need to change my sleep habits, and which we talked about in the last Coffee and Insights. And the other one is about I need to change my phone habits. And this is where I'm going to bring in Hilda Burke, who is an integrative psychotherapist. She's a couples counsellor and a life coach, and author of the Phone Addiction Workbook. Hilda, are you there? I think you're on mute at the moment, and are we able to see you? Excellent. Oh, that's a bit strange. Hold on, I can't see you. I don't know whether you can, we can't properly see you. I don't know whether you can, and I can't hear you actually. Oh, no, I can hear you.
Is the picture very
yes, it's a little bit strange, I'll be honest with you.
Yeah.
But
there it is.
There we go.
There it is.
I don't want to say, but you look a little bit better now. Okay, Hilda, thank you so much for joining us. And we've got just a few minutes, I know, and you've got to run off for a meeting. But I want to talk to you, and I think many of us can resonate with members of our family or even ourselves just being addicted to our phone. And we pick it up and there isn't even anything there, but we've got like this thing that we're constantly looking at. So just tell us very quickly, first of all, what does even phone usage do to our brain?
I think that the research is still sort of in its infancy about that, because we haven't done the sort of longitudinal research, because smartphones have only been around about 15 years. They've been sort of really everywhere for about a decade. So we really don't have that long kind of research, particularly developmentally. I think for kids it's going to be really interesting and probably very scary to see over time what has happened to a 7-year-old who got a smartphone 10 years ago and what happened with the brain development. So I mean, there's the kind of short-term stuff like the dopamine and how we kind of crave more. The more we use it, the more we need to use it, like any sort of stimulant, addictive stimulant. But I think the long-term research isn't there yet, and that's going to be I think it's going to change our attitudes to, it's a lot of talk about discourse about phone use being seen as the new kind of nicotine, the way it's sort of, it's very pervasive. It disturbs other people. It's not just your own use, but people having their phones on loudspeaker, people being distracted, things bleeping, buzzing. It's really invading our personal space, and it's not just what it does to us, it's what it does to our communities, what it does to our families, what it does in the workplace. So I think there's growing awareness of the kind of how widely it sort of infects communities in a very harmful way. So I think we're probably going to see a lot more sort of health warnings about smartphone use, and sort of starting to see areas, cafes, bars, where they're like, please put your phones down, and concerts as well, musical artists saying, you know, you have to lock your phone away. So I think we're going to see a lot more of that, a really sort of shift. We're starting to see it with schools and certain institutions, but I think it's going to become a lot more pervasive
Yeah,
kind of
that's
boundary
so
phone use.
interesting. And I wonder whether workplaces are seeing that, you know, where there are, I mean, it's obviously a bit counterintuitive because you're supposed to work and maybe be on a call or something on your phone. But I wonder whether workplaces are creating areas where there are no phones, or, you know, I wonder whether we're going to see that. Or, as you said, even when you're in a meeting and that person's not with you because they're constantly looking at their phone, whether there's going to be sort of rules of engagement. So I suppose my kind of final question, you mentioned very briefly that term dopamine, but actually, why have we got to this stage? Why are people highly addicted to a phone? What is that? What is that thing?
There's a Harvard physics professor said there's only two industries that call their customers users. One is illegal drugs, and the other is software. So there is, you know, I think that the organizations are very adept, very like. There's a lot of research going into, you know, our psychological process, behavioral, cognitive psychology in these organizations, these software, these app developers. So they know us and what we like better than we know ourselves usually. So, you know, we're sort of up against it. It's not that we're, you know, we're all lazy, we have no willpower, but we're being sort of, we're being trained really by these software companies. They know exactly the attention frame that they have for us, and how to, you know, there's a really interesting feature on Instagram that was introduced a couple of years back, which is, you know, when you go on Instagram, or probably a lot of the social media, your notifications, your messages don't come up immediately. There's a lag of about 5 seconds. And that is built on the principle that dopamine is higher when it's slightly delayed, when there's the anticipation of pleasure. It has a bigger effect. So that's an example of something where they really get us and they know us. And I think we are sort of up against it in terms of trying to kind of rely on our own inner resources, our own willpower to defend ourselves, to defend our time, to defend our headspace against the onslaught.
That's you have totally enlightened me by reminding me that we are a user. I think that's super interesting. And I think that even if this short conversation enables people to think themselves about how do I use my phone just for 5 minutes, I think, you know, we've done a good job in starting this conversation. I think we will be having this conversation more and more. I'm keen to hear, you know, what workplaces are doing. Hilda, thank you so much for giving us that taste. I really appreciate you being with us. I will send you back to somewhere in the ether, and we will speak soon.
Take care.
Bye. Bye. So thank you to Hilda, and thank you to everyone. So that was a whistle-stop tour of a few insights just to get you thinking for half an hour, whether it's the beginning of the day, more of the end of your day, a few little nuggets to go away with. I certainly have a lot to go away with. ADHD burnout is something that I really didn't know anything about. I'm really grateful to Asad for talking to us about his grief network, and being a user of our phone. That is really going to resonate with me. So everyone, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Just to remind everybody, the big conference of the year, obviously the best day in your year, June the 12th. We are gearing up for that. It's going to be bigger and better than ever before. We're really looking forward to seeing you. The agenda is going up on the website, the starting agenda, hopefully by the end of today, so we can all start getting excited about that. And also just a reminder that the awards are open. You are all doing so much great stuff, and we'd love to see you enter the awards. So everyone, thanks again for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed your coffee, tea, hot chocolate, whatever it might be, and look forward to seeing you at the next Coffee and Insights. Thanks, everybody.